Carrie, have you ever noticed all those business books?
I mean, yeah, they're on my shelf back here. I've got a lot of them. These are the childcare specific. These are faith ones, and then up here I have the ones that are general business. So I got three piles of them.
And on all those piles, how many of them are women?
I mean, not a majority. I would say a majority are white men in their 50s, 60s, and 70s.
Okay, that's just wrong. So today, Carrie and I are going to talk about what prompted us to write the I Got This Leadership Blueprint. So if you haven't heard, Carrie and I have book number 8. Now, it's book number 8 in child business development. It is not our 8th book because we both have written a lot of others and we wrote a children's book together.
And I wrote some other children's books by my own self.
And I
So
wrote some cookbooks. Um, so anyway, we were sitting in a workshop, we were in a conference, and in the room, over 50% of the room were women. The presenter was a respected early childhood leader, and he was giving everybody suggestions, Carrie, of what leadership books they needed to read. And when you and I think about the director bookshelf, we don't automatically think a bunch of 50, 60, 70-year-old white dudes.
no. And, one of I should have pulled out some of my favorite books before we got to talking. And there are books that are my favorite director resource books that are written by people who are now dead. So it's not just him who is like, hey, look, read this book by a dead person. I have some of those too, because just because they've passed away doesn't mean that the information isn't valuable. Like my favorite finance book that I'm obsessed with, and that person wrote it in the 80s. It was one of my first textbooks, I think.
I know,
Uh,
and I've got some fun facts on that book, but we'll come back to that later.
but, Think and Grow Rich, he's not around anymore.
Well, that book does have some issues. We could definitely come back and make that Think and Grow, rich women's version. So,
What? You're going to take the misogyny out of it?
a
Why are you
little
going
bit.
to?
Okay, so back to my rant. So, Carrie and I are in this workshop. The presenter did a great job, but I couldn't believe that every resource he gave was a leadership book by a white guy. And in early childcare, one of the things that Carrie and I have really been struggling with over the last couple of years is that representation matters. We say this all the time, but yet we go to conferences, and here we are at a conference listening to a presenter, and they aren't thinking about who's in the audience. So we have a leadership book for women by women for women in childcare. And we are really, really excited about being able to do that. Now, do we think this is the end all leadership guide? No. But is it a place to start? Absolutely. And we know that there are some fantastic women entrepreneurs that are in leadership, and we want them to write their books too. And if you need help with that, reach out to us. Anyway, so
Here's the thing, the books that we do have that are written by women that are for administrators of childcare programs, they are textbooks. And so they cost $150 and they're updated every 2 years. So, but very little changes. Because I have one book I have gotten 5 different editions of, and very little changed inside from year to year. But it was 150 bucks, and I had to get it every time a course I took required that book. It was very frustrating.
well, the one thing that I thought was interesting, and it wasn't exactly on the book I just grabbed, but a lot of the women's leadership books that I went to go look for were under self help. Why is a women's leadership book under self help and a men's leadership book is under business?
Because they don't read the statistics at the Department of Labor and the Department. Uh, the Small Business Administration, and they don't know that more women start businesses than men start businesses. Maybe that's why they're uneducated. The people who are putting them in categories are uneducated. They're just going by their bias, because if you were educated, you would know that depending on the year, between 60 and 70% of the new businesses started are started by women. So we should be getting more books, not the guy.
We should feel like we have the authority to write those books, and we want you to. We want you to be a guest on our podcast. We want to help you write your first book. We want to help you with your keynotes. We have lots of goals for you, and we hope that this book will be a great opportunity for you to sit down and realize. And again, we are not bashing, because we've used them as our own virtual mentors and coaches, right? So we have books on our bookshelf from the Tony Robbins, the Napoleon Hills, the Jack Maxwell's, John Maxwell, the Dale Carnegie's, I mean, we have those books.
The chicken soup guy.
Yeah.
The love language the love languages guy. We've
Stephen
read.
Covey. Yeah, we have all of them. And I'm looking for more of the women's ones. And I do have Brene Brown, and I have a couple others that I've ordered because I was like, there has to be more, and trying to search for women's books on leadership that aren't textbooks, that aren't in self-help or aren't full of that kind of language, but most of them that were in the self-help category. And I found 10, Carrie, 10 in the last 10 years by women, only 2 by major publishing houses.
Well, I mean, we could go on a whole other rant about publishing houses, and I can do that all day long, because the publishing houses aren't taking on new authors unless that new author has a whole bunch of following. And even if they do take on, like, I have a friend who is absolutely a leader in her industry, and she sent out over 100 pitches to different publishers, and she had a decent following, and she had a successful business behind her, and they all passed. So she self-published the book and has sold plenty of copies because she knew there was a demand.
Mm-hmm.
But she didn't know how to self-publish, and I didn't reach out to her early enough in the process to be like, hey, I can help you with that. But she got it done. And here's the thing: self-publishing or publishing with a small publishing house 10 years ago was considered, oh, you're not good enough for the big publishing houses. But that's not the case anymore. The big publishing houses aren't taking a risk on people that they don't know are going to. Dan Brown could not get the Da Vinci Code published today, without
Well,
a doubt.
the other thing to think about, though, I mean, let's be realistic. If you look at how little per book those authors make out of the big publishing houses, even what we make when we self-publish on something like Amazon versus some of the other bookbuy.me and stuff like that, right? Like, there's a lot of different ways if you're looking at that as a true revenue stream versus a way to build your authority. So,
Because if Susie Orman and what's the money guy who talks about the snowball? Dave Ramsey. Susie Orman and Dave Ramsey, they both quote unquote self-publish their books. So if these are two of the leading lights in personal finance, and they self-publish their books or use small publishing houses, in Dave Ramsey's case, that he owns the publishing house.
wouldn't know anything about that.
No, I don't know anything about it. But if you've got people who their whole deal is personal finance, and most of their books are not traditionally published by the big 5, it's because of finances. They can get more of the revenue if they self-publish than if they're with the big 5. And the big 5, it's really just a vanity metric because you wanted to be a New York Times best-selling author. I don't know that anybody in early childhood is going to get to become a bestseller by those vanity metrics, because it's not who has sold the most books in a category. But again, that is another soapbox I will get off of. Because if they were best-selling authors, then Harlequin romance novels would always be at the top of that list, or other books like that, because they sell way more copies. Stepping off my box now.
Okay. Well, I'm glad you've stepped off yours. I've stepped off mine. Hopefully, folks who are listening will go grab our book. And I want you to pause and think. I want you to reflect on what's on your director bookshelf. And have you got books from leaders in our industry? Do you have Vernon Mason's book? Do you have Summer Bika's book? Do you have Kathy Ligon's book? Do you have all 8 of ours? Well, probably not all 8, because one of them's in Spanish. But do you have ours? I'm going to just say it. Why not? Chris Murray. We have a lot of people in the industry who've written a lot of books, and not just Red Leaf Press. Red Leaf Press is, again, a great boutique publisher that focuses on ECE publications, but it's not the only place. And if you pay attention and you follow us on social media and you follow our podcast, you'll probably hear some other authors coming on board over the course of the year that'll be doing some guest spots, because we are helping them write their book. And we're excited about seeing where that goes for both of them. And well, for those two, we've got some others that are coming down the pike, and we can't wait to hear your story. And if you need help with that, let us know. Carrie, where do we want to take it?
Well, I think that you need to embody the front cover of our book. You need to know that you are secretly a superhero. So we use that imagery a lot in our book covers, because we think every director, every school owner is secretly a superhero. So you're secretly a superhero. Get out there, read books that help you feel like a superhero. And if you learned something from today's show, please share it with a friend, and go to your podcast player of choice and write a review. And we will talk to you next week.